A mysterious letter arrives at the White House, penned by an unusually young Navy captain named Emma Caldwell. Despite the noise of media speculation, President Donald Trump grants her an audience. What is so urgent that it compels a 28-year-old officer to request a private meeting in the Oval Office? As whispers of controversy and sacrifice swirl around Emma's past, she stands on the brink of a conversation that could shift national perspectives on leadership, service, and the unseen weight that every decision carries. Before we dive into the story, make sure you subscribe to our channel and hit the like button if you enjoy deep dive narratives and real-life stories with powerful lessons. Now, let's begin. It all started with a letter, nothing fancy. Just a single page slipped into the ever-growing stack of correspondence that flooded the White House daily. Amid messages from dignitaries and public figures, this particular envelope stood out. It was from Emma Caldwell, a 28-year-old Navy captain whose name had begun circulating in military circles. Her rank at such a young age was rare, practically unheard of, and she wasn't a seasoned admiral or a high-profile government official. Yet, she had the audacity to request a personal meeting with the President of the United States. When the letter reached President Donald Trump's desk, he skimmed it with mild curiosity. "Mr. President, I have something important to discuss. Not for my sake, but for those who serve in silence," it read. Intrigued, Trump leaned back in his chair, wondering what matter was so pressing that a young captain would bypass every protocol to speak directly to him. "Who is Captain Caldwell?" Trump asked his aides, his eyebrow arched. A senior advisor flipped through a file. "Emma Caldwell, sir. Top of her class at the Naval Academy. Commissioned at 22, took command at 26. She has a solid record, though there's some controversy tied to a mission 3 years ago." Trump set the letter down. He had dealt with generals, admirals, and military strategists from all branches, but this was different. Why would a relatively new captain want a private audience? Was she seeking a promotion? Trying to highlight a crucial threat? The letter was vague, hinting only that she needed to voice something on behalf of those who couldn't. In a decisive tone, Trump said, "All right, let's hear her out. Make the arrangements." Soon after, word leaked. The president was meeting a 28-year-old Navy captain. The media caught wind, igniting speculation across social platforms and news outlets. Enjoying the story so far? Remember to like this video and help us reach our 1,000 subscribers. Emma Caldwell, meanwhile, was no stranger being underestimated. At 18, people told her the Naval Academy was too challenging, but she graduated top of her class. At 22, she became an officer. At 26, she took command, an appointment that many claimed was too soon. She'd proven them wrong at every turn. When she received confirmation of the meeting, she felt a jolt of nerves. She was about to speak not just for herself, but for every soldier who'd made sacrifices that never made headlines. This wasn't a publicity stunt. It was about truth, the kind nobody wanted to admit was real. As her military transport touched down at Joint Base Andrews, an overcast sky mirrored the tension she felt. Word travels fast in Washington. A few reporters had gathered, calling out questions. Emma kept her expression neutral, reminding herself she was trained for high-pressure scenarios. This was merely a new kind of battlefield. The White House lawns were immaculate under the gray morning light. Emma's heart pounded the moment she stepped onto the path leading to the front entrance. Memories of past sacrifices flooded her mind. Friends lost in service, missions that went sideways despite her best efforts. She drew a deep breath. Now was her moment to confront the reality of those decisions head-on. Inside the Oval Office, the atmosphere was both formal and strangely intimate. Mahogany furniture gleamed under soft lighting, and portraits of past leaders adorned the walls. Trump stood near his desk, hands in his pockets, looking at Emma with curiosity and a hint of respect. "Captain Caldwell," he greeted, "I hear you have quite the story." Standing at attention, Emma saluted. "Mr. President, thank you for seeing me." He gestured for her to take a seat. "Your letter got my attention. Let's hear it from the beginning." Emma felt the enormity of this moment. She wasn't in a war zone, but the stakes felt equally high, maybe higher. She gathered her thoughts. This isn't about promotions or personal ambition. It's about the unspoken burdens our servicemen and women carry. We talk a lot about heroes, but rarely about the weight that comes with leadership, the night spent replaying decisions that led to lost lives. Trump's gaze narrowed, his tone reflecting genuine curiosity. You mentioned a specific mission 3 years ago. What happened? Emma steadied her voice. The memory was raw. It was a routine assignment, or so we thought. Unexpected complications led to casualties, including my best friend, Lieutenant Jake Carter. I was in command. The responsibility was mine. Silence settled in the room. From across the desk, Trump nodded slowly, as if to say he recognized the gravity of that admission. "Tell me more," he said, keeping his voice low. "If you're intrigued by what's happened in Emma's mission, remember to give this video a subscribe. Every single one helps us get closer to 1,000 subscribers, fueling more great stories." 3 years ago, Emma had been deployed on a naval operation that appeared routine on paper. Intelligence indicated minimal risk. But an unpredictable turn, bad weather, faulty intel, equipment glitches, combined to produce a scenario no training manual could fully address. Emma made a critical call that day. She believed it was the right one, but the outcome claimed lives. Among them was Lieutenant Carter, who trusted her implicitly. Emma explained, "Ever since that day, I've carried the weight of every soldier who didn't make it home. We celebrate victories, but rarely acknowledge the emotional toll of leading troops into situations where not everyone returns." Trump's expression hardened. He had comforted families of fallen soldiers. He knew the heartbreak from a commander-in-chief's vantage point, but hearing it from someone so young, someone who directly bore responsibility, brought a new perspective. "You think Americans need to hear this side of leadership?" he asked. "Yes, sir." Outside the Oval Office, speculation was mounting. Some insiders whispered that Emma's meeting could be a stepping stone to a fast-track political career. Others believed she was planning to expose wrongdoing. Meanwhile, Emma's mission was simpler: to advocate for those who serve quietly, whose voices are overshadowed by headlines about major operations or high-ranking officials. Her conversation with Trump delved deeper. She noted that service isn't just about missions. It's about the mental scars, the families affected, and the internal struggles that follow you home. She emphasized that many soldiers feel guilty for surviving when comrades do not. Trump leaned back, considering her words. "You're saying the system overlooks this burden?" She nodded, partially. It's not intentional neglect, but the focus is often on success stories. Behind every medal stands a story of what it cost. For a moment, neither spoke. The clock ticked softly, underscoring how far-reaching Emma's words could be. Word leaked that the two were discussing sensitive military issues. Online forums buzzed. Some cheered Emma's bravery. Others questioned her credentials. Emma was aware of the chatter, but chose to ignore it. This was never about personal glory. It was about confronting truths others prefer to brush aside. Trump, too, recognized the media storm forming. With a thoughtful expression, he said, "You know, the public mostly sees the commander-in-chief's decisions on a grand scale. Troop deployments, major foreign policy moves. Not many see the sleepless nights or the personal toll on those in the field." Emma exhaled, grateful for the empathy. "That's why I'm here, sir. I'm not naive. I know the chain of command exists for a reason, but sometimes a direct message to the top can shift national focus." Nodding, Trump asked, "If you had a bigger stage, say, a national address, what would you say?" Emma's heart skipped a beat. Could this conversation become a catalyst for broader change? Trump's question hung in the air. Emma had never considered speaking beyond the confines of military channels. Public addresses were typically for high-ranking generals or specialized spokespersons. Yet the president seemed to be nudging her toward a larger platform. "I'd talk about responsibility," Emma ventured, "and the need for better support systems for mental health. Soldiers carry trauma, guilt, and memories of loss that can undermine even the strongest among us. We need open acknowledgement and real resources." Trump's demeanor shifted, reflecting genuine concern. "We've increased some funding for military mental health, but it's never enough, is it?" Emma gave a respectful nod. "I've seen progress, but the stigma remains." We reward outward strength and often overlook silent struggles. He tapped his fingers on the desk, as if weighing a decision. All right, let me think on this. If we do something, we do it right. News channels were already picking up headlines. 28-year-old Navy captain's bold meeting with POTUS. Rising star or overstepping rank? Pundits debated Emma's motives, while the public reacted on social media. That evening, back at her temporary quarters, Emma scrolled through feeds, seeing a mix of praise and criticism. Some labeled her inspiring. Others called her arrogant. She closed her phone, reminded herself of her purpose, to speak for soldiers like Jake, who no longer had a voice. A gentle knock sounded at her door. A White House liaison stood outside. Captain Caldwell, the president has a request. He'd like you to address the press tomorrow. Her stomach churned. Address the press? On what scale? She nodded, feeling the magnitude of the next day's step. Could she handle a media spotlight fueled by curiosity and political undertones? Enjoying the story so far? Remember to like this video and help us reach our 1,000 subscribers. Morning arrived with an electric buzz in the air. White House staff prepared the press briefing room for an unexpected statement. Journalists jockeyed for front row seats. Rumors circulated. Was Emma Caldwell about to drop a bombshell about the military? Or was this a carefully orchestrated PR move? Emma arrived in her crisp Navy uniform, posture straight. She thought about Jake's final words to her. He had once joked, "If it ever goes south, don't carry me like a ghost." Yet she had for 3 years. Now, maybe she could channel that grief into something productive. Trump met her briefly in the hallway. "Ready, Captain?" he asked with a confident nod. "As ready as I'll ever be, sir," she replied, bracing herself. A fleeting moment of clarity washed over her. This wasn't about her. It was about every soldier overshadowed by unspoken pain. The press briefing room brimmed with reporters. Cameras pivoted the moment Emma stepped to the podium. Lights and microphones surrounded her, capturing every breath. She inhaled quietly, recalling her training on composure under duress. "Good morning," she began, her voice firm. "I'm Captain Emma Caldwell of the U.S. Navy. I'm here to talk about something we rarely discuss openly, the cost of leadership and the silence many service members endure after sacrifices on the field." An immediate hush fell over the room. Emma paused, scanning the sea of cameras and notepads. She thought about those who had emailed her overnight, veterans from past wars, families who'd lost loved ones, service members struggling with guilt. With them in mind, she pressed on. "We celebrate victories, honor medals, but rarely address the weight we carry when things go wrong." Flashes flickered like tiny bursts of lightning, capturing every subtle shift in Emma's expression. She recounted her experience on that fateful mission. The routine assignment that spiraled into chaos, the phone call she had to make to Lieutenant Carter's parents. She didn't dwell on graphic details. She wanted to emphasize the emotional toll that outlasts the mission itself. "I've seen seasoned officers crumble under guilt," Emma said. "And the worst part? Most of them feel they can't talk about it openly, for fear of looking weak." Her gaze swept the crowd. But vulnerability isn't weakness. It's what keeps us human. Many reporters seemed transfixed, some scribbling notes while others stared in rapt attention. Emma's message was raw, a stark departure from the polished spin often associated with military press conferences. Questions erupted the moment she finished her opening remarks. "Captain Caldwell, are you implying the military doesn't provide enough mental health support? Do you believe President Trump has neglected these concerns? How should the chain of command address these struggles?" Emma raised a hand to keep order. "I'm not here to criticize individuals or parties. I'm here to share a truth. Leadership is about carrying the weight of lives placed under your command. That weight doesn't vanish after a mission." Behind the scenes, White House staff watched closely. This wasn't a typical scripted event. Emma was speaking candidly, a risk for any administration. Yet Trump had opened the door for her to do so, seemingly comfortable with the unpredictability of her honesty. Meanwhile, public opinion soared. Social media trended with hashtags like #ServeInSilence and #Captain Caldwell. Veterans began posting stories of their own burdens, praising Emma for daring to address mental health and leadership accountability on a public stage. In the press room, Emma fielded a final round of questions. One reporter asked, "Captain, do you feel your age undermines your credibility? Some critics say you're too young to represent the entire military." Emma straightened. "Age didn't matter when I had to make life-and-death calls in the field. It shouldn't matter now. Experience is measured by the responsibilities you shoulder, not just by the years you've lived." The camera lights glinted off her uniform as she ended. "If sharing my story can spark even one conversation about better supporting our troops, it's worth it." By the time Emma stepped away from the podium, the press room buzzed with electric energy. Journalists fired off immediate reports. Commentators on TV dissected her every sentence. Some lauded her courage and clarity, while critics dismissed it as idealistic or an attempt to gain spotlight. Emma headed backstage, face flushed. Trump approached, meeting her halfway. "You spoke from the heart," he said quietly. "Not everyone does that here." She allowed herself a small smile, relief washing over her. She knew the swirl of public opinion would be intense, but at least she'd said what needed to be said. Within hours, Emma's speech flooded news cycles. Military families chimed in, sharing personal anecdotes. Soldiers still on active duty posted anonymous comments about how they appreciated someone finally shedding light on the mental toll. Emma, alone in a quiet hallway, felt a strange mix of liberation and responsibility. Had she opened a door that would be impossible to close? Remember, we're pushing for 1,000 subscribers. If you believe in stories of resilience and everyday heroes, subscribe now and join our growing community. That evening, Emma returned to her hotel room and discovered an inbox overflowing with emails from veterans of Vietnam, Iraq, and Afghanistan, from the families of service members lost in training accidents, from young recruits who just enlisted. Many messages echoed a single theme: "Thank you for telling our story." Emma scrolled through them, emotions swirling. Some wrote of suicidal thoughts. Others shared heartbreak over lost comrades. One older veteran revealed he'd never spoken about his nightmares before hearing her speech. The vulnerability in those messages weighed on Emma. She recognized that by speaking up, she'd become a de facto spokesperson for countless service members. Her phone buzzed, a call from the White House liaison. A new meeting was set for the next day to discuss potential mental health initiatives. Emma clutched the device, heart pounding. Could real change come from this? The following morning, Emma met with a small group of administration officials and military advisors. Trump joined midway, listening intently as Emma recounted the wave of responses. "There's a clear need for more robust mental health programs," she emphasized. "But it's also about culture. Soldiers need permission to speak about what haunts them." One general present shifted uncomfortably, muttering that morale could be compromised if soldiers focused too much on emotional burdens. Emma respectfully disagreed. "Acknowledging our pain doesn't weaken morale. It fortifies trust." She glanced at Trump, who nodded thoughtfully but remained silent. By the end of the meeting, a preliminary plan was formed. Increased outreach within the military, a potential hotline for immediate support, and new training for officers on how to handle mental health crises among their ranks. Though funding and implementation details were complex, it was a start. Outside the West Wing, reporters clamored for updates. Emma provided no official statements, insisting that final decisions needed the appropriate channels. Meanwhile, social media continued dissecting every new rumor. Some hailed Emma as a modern-day hero. Others claimed she was a pawn in a political chess game. That afternoon, Trump asked Emma for a brief private word. They walked through a corridor lined with portraits of past administrations. Stopping by a window overlooking the rose garden, he said, "You're stirring the pot in a place that likes things the way they are." She nodded, a flicker of doubt crossing her mind. "All I want is for the burdens of leadership to be taken seriously." He placed his hands in his pockets. "Sometimes controversy is the price of change. People will fight back when they feel threatened. Keep doing what you believe is right, and history will judge the rest." Before leaving Washington, Emma made a quiet trip to Arlington National Cemetery. She moved with measured steps between orderly rows of white headstones, each representing a life cut short. Her eyes landed on the gravestone of Lieutenant Jake Carter. Kneeling, she placed a small patch from her uniform beside his name. Her voice was soft as she spoke. "You told me not to carry you like a ghost, Jake, but you're the reason I found the courage to speak." The air was still. She closed her eyes, recalling the day he died, the sense of finality and the promise she'd made to herself. If she ever had a chance to protect the next soldier from this fate, she'd take it, no matter the personal cost. Standing, she saluted silently. Mission accomplished, she thought, turning to leave. That evening, as Emma prepared to depart Washington, she noticed an outpouring of new interviews. A retired general criticized her approach. "We solve problems in the chain of command, not on the evening news." On another network, a veteran of multiple wars praised her as the wake-up call we needed. Emma recognized this as part of the process. Real change rarely arrived without friction. She whispered to herself, "Stay the course, Caldwell." She'd lit a spark. Whether it became a flame would depend on how many others stepped forward. Trump also made a brief statement to reporters, remarking that Captain Caldwell's perspective is invaluable, and the administration is exploring ways to support her concerns. This measured endorsement confirmed that Emma's efforts weren't in vain. In the days that followed, Emma worked behind the scenes, connecting with advocacy groups, participating in roundtable discussions, and offering guidance on policy reforms targeting mental health in the military. Though she had no interest in a permanent political role, she found herself thrust into conversations that spanned from the Pentagon to Capitol Hill. Meanwhile, Jake Carter's story went viral, inspiring tributes to fallen soldiers who never made the news. Veterans began sharing personal anecdotes in online forums, amplifying a broader narrative. The unseen cost of wearing the uniform. Families expressed gratitude that someone at last had the courage to say what they felt for years. Emma, back on base, prepared for her next posting. She remained a captain, a soldier with duties to fulfill. But now, she carried more than her rank. She carried the voices of countless individuals who hoped for a better future where leadership meant not just guiding troops to victory, but guiding them back to wholeness. This story underscores the weight of leadership, particularly how each decision can leave lasting emotional imprints on those in command. Through Emma's journey, we see how speaking uncomfortable truths can ignite larger conversations about mental health, accountability, and the shared burden service members quietly endure. It also highlights that meaningful change often demands stepping outside traditional boundaries, even if it stirs controversy. Emma Caldwell's courage reminds us that real leadership isn't just about medals or promotions. It's about carrying the memories of those who fell and finding ways to honor their sacrifice. Sometimes, that means confronting high-level officials or the nation itself to make sure every soldier's story is heard. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss our latest content. Also, click on the card on your screen to jump into our next story. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.